A dog, abandoned for many years, continued to wait faithfully for its former owner to return. However, when the owner finally came back to find him, the dog's behavior took an unexpected turn. In a quaint little town surrounded by rolling green hills and sunlit vineyards, there stood a bustling gas station. Anyone passing through would likely spot an endearing brown and white dog, always there to greet every visitor with a wag of his tail. This dog, who had become somewhat of a local celebrity, was adored by all who saw him. He had the look of a happy, healthy animal with a glossy coat and bright, lively eyes. Yet there was an air of mystery about him, a story no one really knew. He spent hours there, never seeming inclined to return to a home, and over time his appearance began to change. He grew thinner, his coat lost its luster, and patches of fur started to fall away, hinting at a skin condition that worsened by the day. The sight of his decline touched the hearts of the townspeople, who banded together, offering him food and even shelter. They named him Buddy. Despite their efforts, it was clear he needed more help. Among those who couldn't ignore Buddy's suffering was Hannah, a determined and compassionate woman. Each day, on her way to work, she would see Buddy, and with every passing morning, his health seemed to deteriorate a bit more. Hannah knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. One typical morning, as she drove past her usual route, Hannah was confronted with a heartbreaking sight. Buddy could barely stand, and his condition had grown alarmingly worse. Seeing him like that shattered Hannah's heart, and at that moment she realized she had to act. Without hesitation, she approached the dog, her resolve clear. With kindness and a determined spirit, she gently reached out to him, ready to do whatever it took to save him. Deeply moved by Buddy's plight, Hannah made a brave decision. She took him home. There, she tenderly cared for him, using a special shampoo to soothe his irritated skin, and taking the time to gently comb through his matted fur. She also made sure he had a proper, nourishing diet, which slowly but surely began to restore his health. As the days passed, a special bond formed between Hannah and Buddy, demonstrating the transformative power of care and compassion. Hannah started to adjust to life with Buddy by her side, and gradually her daily routine found a new rhythm. Every morning, Buddy would trot alongside her to the door, tail wagging with excitement, as if he understood she would be back soon. For Hannah, Buddy's presence became a source of comfort, filling the once empty corners of her home with warmth and joy. However, there was something that continued to trouble her. Despite the love and care he received, Buddy still seemed haunted by his past. Every now and then, during their walks around the neighborhood, Buddy would pause, turning his head to look back, staring intently in the direction of the spot where Hannah had first found him. His eyes, usually bright with life and gratitude, would cloud over for a moment, as if he was lost in distant memories. Hannah would try to distract him, calling his name, offering a toy, or quickening her pace. But the thought that Buddy was still waiting for someone or something lingered in her mind. One evening, after a particularly long and tiring day at work, Hannah came home feeling more drained than usual. It was one of those sticky, oppressive summer nights where the heat seemed to follow you indoors. She dropped her things on the table and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Buddy, as always, was right by her side. But he sensed something different. Hannah was quieter, almost absent, as if lost in her own thoughts. As the food simmered on the stove, Hannah sank into the living room couch, closing her eyes for just a moment, intending only to rest. But exhaustion took over, and she soon fell into a deep sleep. Buddy, who had been watching her from his usual spot by the couch, grew restless. The scent of burning food started to fill the room, and soon a small fire erupted on the stove, spreading quickly to the curtains nearby. Sensing the danger, Buddy sprang into action. He dashed to Hannah, nudging her leg with his nose and barking frantically. But she didn't wake. Determined, the little dog leapt onto the couch, pushing his head against her arm with all his strength, his barks growing louder and more urgent. At last, Hannah stirred, initially confused, but the smell of smoke quickly brought her to her senses. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, leaping off the couch and sprinting to the kitchen. The sight of the fire froze her in place for a moment, but her survival instincts kicked in almost immediately. With trembling hands, she grabbed a blanket from the sofa and, without a second thought, threw it over the flames, smothering the fire. Buddy, by her side, barked incessantly until the last wisp of smoke dissipated. Hannah fell to her knees, still in shock from what had just happened, and hugged Buddy tightly, feeling her heart pounding wildly in her chest. "Thank you, Buddy," she whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. "You saved my life." Buddy, as if he understood her words, softly licked her hand. At that moment, Hannah felt a wave of emotions surge through her, overwhelming her. From that day on, the bond between Hannah and Buddy grew even stronger. The little dog was no longer just a rescued animal. He had become her protector, her loyal companion. The gratitude Hannah felt for Buddy was evident in every gesture, in every glance they shared. But there was still something mysterious about Buddy's behavior. Every now and then he would gaze toward the intersection with a look that was a mix of hope and sorrow. And Hannah couldn't help but wonder if she would ever be able to fill the emptiness that seemed to weigh on him. Determined to do more for Buddy, one weekend, she took his leash and led him back to the intersection, hoping that maybe, by returning to where she had first found him, she might uncover some answers. When they arrived, Buddy sat down in the exact spot where Hannah had seen him for the first time. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, while the hum of traffic filled the air. Buddy remained still, staring intently in the direction of the road, as if waiting for someone to appear. Hannah knelt down beside him, feeling a sadness she couldn't quite explain. "Are you waiting for someone, Buddy?" she asked softly, knowing she wouldn't get a reply. Time passed slowly in Hannah's small home. Yet, Buddy's constant presence filled every corner with a mix of tenderness and melancholy. Despite all the care and love Hannah showered him with, there was something in Buddy that never seemed fully at peace. Days and weeks went by, and though his physical health visibly improved, his spirit continued to show signs of unease. Hannah, observant and sensitive, noticed that Buddy had an unbreakable ritual. Every day, without fail, he would turn his gaze toward the intersection where she had found him, as if he were waiting for something or someone to suddenly appear. This constant, persistent behavior began to tug at Hannah's heart. The thought that Buddy might be waiting for his former family became clearer in her mind. She had heard stories of dogs remaining loyal to their owners, even after years of separation, and the possibility that Buddy was one of those dogs filled her with sorrow. How could she compete with the bond Buddy had formed with his past? Hannah didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't ignore Buddy's feelings, no matter how painful they might be for her. Determined to do something about it, Hannah reached out to her friend Megan, a woman with a generous heart and a spirit always ready to lend a hand. When Megan heard Buddy's story, she was deeply moved. She was one of those people who always found a way to do good, and, in this case, she decided the best way to help Buddy was to try to locate his original family. Megan thought that if Buddy could be reunited with them, he might finally find the peace he seemed to long for. With this plan in mind, Megan turned to social media to share Buddy's story. She wrote a heartfelt post recounting how this noble dog had waited at the same spot for years, hoping to reunite with his family. She included recent photos of Buddy, now with a shinier coat, and that same look of hope and sadness that defined him. Megan knew the power of social media and hoped that Buddy's story would reach the right eyes. The impact was immediate. Within days, Buddy's story had been shared hundreds of times, crossing borders and touching hearts everywhere. Supportive comments, words of encouragement, and questions about Buddy's history flooded the post. Many people offered to adopt Buddy if his family couldn't be found, while others shared similar stories of animals who had waited for their owners for years. Hannah, though grateful for Megan's help, felt torn. On one hand, she wanted nothing more than for Buddy to find the peace he so deserved. But on the other, the thought of losing him filled her with dread. Over time, she had grown to love Buddy as if he were a part of her own family. The idea that he might leave brought a tight knot to her throat. Still, she understood that doing the right thing wasn't always easy. And in this case, the right thing was to give Buddy the chance to reconnect with his past, even if it meant their time together might come to an end. Months passed, and while the post continued to circulate, there was no sign of Buddy's former family. Megan and Hannah began to come to terms with the possibility that they might never appear. Life in the small house settled into a quiet routine, with Buddy and Hannah sharing their days in peaceful harmony, though a lingering shadow of hope always flickered in Buddy's eyes. Then, almost 2 years after the original post went viral, something unexpected happened. A woman named Carla reached out to Megan through a private message. She said she had seen the photos of Buddy and was almost certain that he was the dog she had lost long ago. Carla explained that it had been hard for her to accept Buddy's disappearance, and seeing the post had stirred up a mix of joy and heartache. It took time for her to gather the courage to reach out, but she finally decided she couldn't pass up the chance to find out if that dog was really hers. The morning of the long-awaited reunion arrived, bringing a whirlwind of emotions for Hannah. Though she hadn't slept well the night before, she got up early and prepared Buddy for what would be a crucial day. Doubts gnawed at her, but she had made her decision and knew she had to see it through. As she brushed Buddy's fur one last time, a deep sadness settled over her, as if she was saying goodbye to a cherished friend. She gently stroked his head, while Buddy, oblivious to what was about to happen, wagged his tail with the same unwavering loyalty. The meeting place was the intersection where Hannah had first found Buddy years ago. That familiar spot, so full of memories, would now witness a new chapter in Buddy's life. Hannah arrived early, her heart beating with a mix of hope and fear. Before long, she saw a car approaching and knew it was them. Carla and her husband, who had claimed to be Buddy's previous owners, stepped out of the vehicle with a demeanor that, while respectful, felt slightly distant. At first, Buddy didn't show any unusual reaction when he saw them. Hannah watched his every movement, every little gesture, looking for signs of recognition. But then, when Carla crouched down and called him by his old name, something shifted. Buddy's ears perked up, and he immediately raised his head, as if that voice had been etched in the deepest part of his memory. The moments that followed were like an emotional eruption. Buddy began wagging his tail with renewed energy, his eyes lit up, and he leapt towards Carla, who knelt to embrace him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Buddy, unable to contain his joy, nestled into her lap as if the years of separation had never happened. Carla's husband, though more reserved, offered a faint smile, though his eyes seemed more calculating than emotional. Standing a few steps away, Hannah felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Buddy's joy at reuniting with his former family left her speechless, and the certainty that she was losing him washed over her like a wave of grief. Despite her doubts, Hannah knew she had done the right thing. Buddy deserved the chance to return to the family he had waited so long for. With a forced smile, she took a step back, allowing Carla and her husband to take Buddy. "They'll take care of him," she repeated to herself, as if those words could ease the ache that had taken hold of her. The car drove away, and Hannah stood there alone at the intersection, with the image of Buddy fading into the distance etched in her memory. The days that followed were hard for Hannah. The house, once lively and warm with Buddy around, now felt empty and still. She tried to keep up with her daily routine, but the absence of her companion was impossible to ignore. Sadness wrapped around her, and more than once she found herself glancing at the corner where Buddy used to rest, hoping to see him there, only to be met with emptiness. Time seemed to have come to a standstill for Hannah ever since the day Buddy left with Carla and her husband. Despite her efforts to move on, the void left by Buddy cast a shadow over every corner of her life. The house, once filled with the warmth and joy that the little dog had brought, now felt empty and lifeless, stripped of the soul he had given it with his simple presence. Hannah tried to convince herself that she had done the right thing, that she had given Buddy a chance to reconnect with his past. But the emptiness in her heart told a different story. She couldn't just sever all ties with Buddy. Even if he no longer lived with her, he remained an important part of her life, and she needed to ensure he was okay. Determined, she began planning regular visits to Carla's home. The first time she called to arrange a visit, Carla was friendly but somewhat evasive. "Today's not a good day. Buddy's resting," she said, promising that next week would be better. Although Carla's voice carried a hint of discomfort, Hannah chose not to dwell on it. Days passed, and Hannah called again, hoping this time she could see Buddy. Yet once more, Carla offered excuses, saying they were busy, or that Buddy was at the vet. Concern began to creep into Hannah's mind. Something didn't add up. Carla's evasive manner left her with doubts, but she wasn't ready to believe that anything was truly wrong. However, as the weeks went by and every attempt to visit was turned down, Hannah's worry deepened into a restless anxiety that kept her awake at night. Troubled, she decided to start investigating on her own. Discreetly, she asked Carla's neighbors if they had seen Buddy. The responses were inconsistent. Some claimed to have spotted him in the yard, while others insisted they hadn't seen him for weeks. The uncertainty began to torment her, and Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening to Buddy. One rainy afternoon, Hannah resolved that she needed answers. She drove to Carla's house unannounced, determined to see Buddy and make sure he was safe. When she arrived, she knocked firmly on the door, but there was no response. The house was eerily quiet, as though no one had been there for days. Frustrated and afraid, Hannah decided to walk around the neighborhood to see if anyone had any information. During her stroll, a neighbor approached her, recognizing her from the times she had visited with Buddy. "I haven't seen them much lately," the woman remarked, "but I did see a video of Buddy online not long ago. It looked like they were using him for some kind of event." The mention of the video made Hannah's stomach drop. She thanked the neighbor, and with her heart pounding, she rushed back home to investigate further. With trembling hands, she turned on her computer and began searching social media. It didn't take long for her worst fears to be confirmed. Videos of Buddy, easily recognizable by his unique coat and ever-gentle expression, were all over the internet, showing him being paraded around at events and fairs. Seeing Buddy surrounded by strangers, treated as some kind of attraction, shattered her heart. There was no doubt that Carla and her husband were exploiting Buddy's popularity for their own gain. Hannah was flooded with pain and guilt. She berated herself for having handed Buddy over, for failing to see the couple's true intentions sooner. How could she have been so naive? Buddy, the same dog who had faithfully waited for his family for years, was now being used and mistreated by people who claimed to care for him. The thought of Buddy, who had shown so much love and loyalty, suffering because of her decision was unbearable to Hannah. The following days were a torment. She had no idea what to do. How could she rescue Buddy from the clutches of these people? Every time she tried to think of a solution, the fear of making things worse paralyzed her. She didn't want to involve the authorities without solid evidence. But she couldn't just stand by while Buddy was mistreated. Despair consumed her, and the weight of regret grew heavier with each passing day. The night was dark and quiet, with only the sound of rain tapping against the windows of Hannah's house. Outside, the wind howled, scattering fallen leaves and creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. Hannah sat in the living room, lost in her thoughts, desperately trying to find a way out of the nightmare she had been living since she gave Buddy away. Regret gnawed at her, and a sense of helplessness overwhelmed her each time she thought about what Buddy might be enduring at the hands of Carla and her husband. Then, suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible noise pulled her out of her thoughts. It was a scratching at the door, so soft she wondered if she had imagined it. As she drew closer, the sound became clearer, like a desperate, gentle knock at her door, seeking shelter. When Hannah opened the door, her heart seemed to stop. There, shivering in the cold rain, stood Buddy. The little dog had found his way back. Against all odds, he had returned to his true home. His eyes, usually bright and full of life, were now weary and filled with pain. His once soft, glossy fur was drenched and tangled, and his small body bore the unmistakable marks of abuse. Buddy was injured, yet somehow he had managed to make it back to her. Hannah dropped to her knees at the doorway, unable to hold back the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Buddy, my sweet Buddy," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion as she gathered him in her arms, feeling the chill and dampness radiating from his frail body. Despite the wounds, despite the distance and the suffering, Buddy had once again shown the unbreakable loyalty that defined him. He had traveled miles, all alone, guided by instinct and the love he felt for Hannah, to return to the one place he knew he would be safe. Carefully, Hannah lifted him up and carried him inside, closing the door behind them. Exhausted from the journey, Buddy allowed himself to be cradled, trusting that he was finally back where he belonged. She gently laid him on a blanket on the couch and rushed to fetch towels to dry him off. As she carefully wiped away the water, she could see more clearly the extent of Buddy's injuries. There were cuts on his legs, bruises on his belly, signs of the cruelty he had endured. Anger and sadness surged within Hannah, but she held it back, knowing that right now Buddy needed her to be strong and tender. Hours passed in silence as Hannah tended to his wounds, while Buddy watched her with eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and pain. They didn't need words. They understood each other perfectly. Hannah, with a heart full of love and determination, silently vowed that she would never let anyone hurt Buddy again. She had learned a painful lesson, and she was determined not to repeat it. The calm of that night was shattered the next morning when the doorbell rang sharply, echoing through the quiet house. Still groggy, Hannah rose, a sense of unease tightening in her chest. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Carla and her husband, both wearing expressions that were cold and resolute. Without waiting to be invited, Carla stepped forward, her voice sharp and demanding, as she insisted that Buddy be returned to them. Hannah, stunned by the confrontation, felt her pulse quicken. She had known this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it so soon. Taking a moment to steady herself, she remembered Buddy's injuries and stood firm against the couple. "Buddy is not yours anymore," she said, her voice clear and resolute. She knew she had to be strong for Buddy and everything he had endured. Carla's husband tried to intimidate her, claiming that Buddy was legally theirs and that they had no right to keep him. But Hannah didn't back down. She met their eyes, unwavering, and began to recount everything she had uncovered about their actions. She spoke of the videos, of how they had exploited Buddy for profit, of the injuries they had inflicted. Each word she spoke carried a mix of pain and restrained fury. Carla, hearing the accusations, tried to defend herself, saying they were just trying to find a good home for Buddy, and that they never meant to hurt him. But her words felt hollow, lacking any trace of sincerity. Hannah was not fooled. "I'll call the police," she warned, her tone steely. "And I'll report you for animal cruelty. You have 5 minutes to get off my property." The threat worked. Carla and her husband, seeing they were cornered, exchanged a look of defeat. They realized there was no escape, that their lies had been exposed. Without another word, they turned and walked away, leaving behind the shadow of their wrongdoings. Hannah, her heart still pounding, shut the door and leaned against it, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. She had won this battle, but it had come at a cost. Returning to the living room, she saw Buddy curled up on the couch, gazing at her with those trusting eyes that moved her so deeply. She approached him, gently stroked his fur, and whispered softly, "You don't have to worry anymore, Buddy. You're safe now." Yore, Domi, and nothing will ever separate us again. The morning sun began to filter through the curtains of the small living room, filling the space with a warm, golden glow. A new day was dawning, bringing with it a sense of peace that Hannah hadn't felt in a long time. Buddy, still curled up on the couch, shifted slightly as the first rays of sunlight brushed against his fur. He seemed to rest with a tranquility that had eluded him for months. Seeing him like this, Hannah felt a wave of relief and love wash over her. At last, after everything they had been through, they were together, and that simple truth gave her the strength to face anything that might come their way. The days that followed unfolded in a calm and soothing rhythm. Buddy, slowly but surely, began to regain his energy. With every step he took and each nimble movement, it was clear he was leaving behind the scars of the past. Hannah devoted herself to caring for him with even greater dedication, ensuring he lacked for nothing. What had once been a daily routine that reminded her of Buddy's absence was now filled with small, shared moments of joy. Walks in the park, quiet afternoons in the living room, and nights when they cuddled close. All of it worked to strengthen the bond between them. What surprised Hannah most was that Buddy no longer showed any interest in returning to the intersection where she'd found him. The dog, who used to gaze longingly in that direction, now seemed perfectly at peace in his new home. No more wistful looks at the horizon. No more attempts to return to a place that no longer held any meaning for him. Buddy had found his home, and he had found it in Hannah's heart. This realization filled Hannah with a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that, in his unwavering loyalty, Buddy had chosen to stay because he knew his true home was by her side. News of Buddy's return and his story of survival spread quickly throughout the community. It wasn't long before neighbors and friends started coming by to show their support and admiration. Buddy's journey from being abandoned and mistreated to finding his way back home touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. Those who had seen him before, during the long days he spent waiting at the intersection, were overjoyed to learn he had finally found the peace and happiness he deserved. Moved by Hannah's dedication and Buddy's resilience, the community came together to offer help in any way they could. Some neighbors began leaving dog food at Hannah's doorstep, while others offered their time to accompany her in caring for Buddy. This outpouring of solidarity was a balm for Hannah, who, for the first time in a long while, felt she wasn't alone in her struggle. The support from the community wasn't just a reflection of the kindness that Buddy had inspired, but also an acknowledgement of Hannah's strength and courage. As the months went by, Hannah became more actively involved in activities promoting animal protection and welfare. Buddy's story had taught her that there were many other dogs in similar situations waiting for a second chance. With the community's help, Hannah began organizing events to raise funds and awareness about animal cruelty. She became a powerful, respected advocate, speaking out for those who couldn't speak for themselves. The connection between Hannah and Buddy not only remained strong, but it deepened over time. Buddy, with his gentle nature and unwavering loyalty, became the center of attention at each event, a living symbol of what love and care could achieve. People who attended these gatherings would often approach Buddy, stroking his fur and thanking him, as if recognizing the inspiration he had become, motivating them to do more for animals in need. Though always humble, Hannah felt proud of the impact their story had on the community. She hadn't just gotten Buddy back. Together, they had sparked a change in how people viewed and treated animals. The once lonely and silent living room was now filled with certificates and photographs from their events, tangible reminders of the journey she and Buddy had embarked on and the good they had achieved together. The bond between Hannah and Buddy had grown into something more than just a simple relationship between a person and her pet. It stood as a testament to the power of love to heal the deepest wounds, to overcome the hardest challenges, and to build a home in the most unexpected of places. Hannah knew that no matter what the future held, as long as they were together, they could face anything. Life, once fraught with uncertainty and hardship, now glowed with a new sense of hope and purpose. Hannah and Buddy, buoyed by their companionship, had not only found solace in each other, but also managed to make a difference in the lives of countless other animals who, like Buddy, yearned for a place where they could be cherished and cared for. The peace that had settled over their home was deep and lasting. At the end of each day, Hannah would sit in her favorite armchair, Buddy by her side, reflecting on all they had endured together. The storms had passed, the wounds were healing, and what remained was an unbreakable bond, forged in both pain and love. Buddy, content and secure, would nuzzle closer to her, letting out a soft sigh, as if acknowledging that they had finally found the place they were always meant to be. Together. The story of Hannah and Buddy is a heartfelt testament to the power of love, loyalty, and compassion. Throughout their journey, Hannah displayed unwavering courage and determination in caring for Buddy, a dog who had known abandonment and cruelty but had never lost hope of finding a true home. The way Buddy, despite all odds, found his way back to Hannah symbolizes the deep, unconditional connection that can exist between an animal and its caregiver. This tale is not only touching because of the special bond between Hannah and Buddy, but also because it reflects the importance of community and mutual support. Hannah's transformation from a solitary caretaker to a leading advocate for animal rights in her community is truly inspiring. Through her actions, this story reminds us that every small act of kindness can have a lasting impact, and that solidarity can make a difference in the lives of those who need it most. The most valuable lesson from this story is the power of love and empathy in all its forms. Hannah shows us that love isn't just a feeling. It's a daily act, a constant choice to care for and protect those we cherish, no matter the challenges. Buddy's loyalty and Hannah's dedication are a reminder that, in a world often marked by indifference, genuine, selfless love can heal the deepest wounds and create a home where once there was only loneliness. If this story has moved you, please like and leave a comment to share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other meaningful stories.